to Inside Tacoma. I'm your host, Sonja Hallum. Today I'm joined by Representative Melanie Morgan from the 29th District. Good afternoon, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
Yes, hello, thank you for the invite.
So you represent the 29th. Can you start by telling us what area the 29th District covers?
Yes, and that's a great question, Sonja, because we just finished redistricting. And so this will encompass South Tacoma from 96 on as well. So all the way up to the Emerald Queen, all the way down to 176, going north and south. East and west would be the east side of Tacoma, all of that. And then all the way into a little bit of West Lakewood, like Lakeview Drive West.
So that's a huge area to be
Yes.
covering in one district. Does that create any unique challenges to you in representing a district that is so expansive?
I don't think it really creates any challenges, as all of the people in my district, we tend to move as one. We are all experiencing some of the same issues. For instance, homelessness is a big issue for us here in the city and the state. But when we come to unincorporated Pierce County, there's where some of the differences of the divide happens. Whereas the city of Tacoma city limits has adequate transportation and resources for my constituents. At the south of the district, we're lacking those resources. For this district, doesn't even have a community center.
So I imagine from your perspective as a representative for the district, you have to be thinking about the different needs for the constituents that are making up your district.
That is correct. And thankfully, I am a mother of 4 children. So that really helps in who needs the most care and what does each person need in my district. So it helps to talk with my people, not just about what do I think they need, but what did I hear that they need.
That makes sense. So I want to jump into our interview today, and before I do, one of the purposes of this show is to give our viewers a chance to know our elected officials a little bit better. And you have an extremely interesting and diverse background. So if we could, I'd like to spend quite a bit of time talking about that very interesting background.
Awesome.
So can you share with our viewers some of your background from your younger days? You know, where you grew up and your upbringing.
Right. It's thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people don't know about my background. But I was blessed to come on this earth in London, England, is where my journey began. And then I was part of a military family. So we moved around a lot, but we spent the bulk of the time in Europe. So I spent a lot of my elementary school days and my junior high days in Spain. And then my high school years would have been in Italy, where I graduated.
So what was that like growing up in Europe?
It wasn't any different for me. This was my life. So it was normal for me. Coming to America was the one that was different for me. So as we're growing up in Europe and all the people who are stationed there, everybody's always talking about can't wait to get back to stateside. You know, McDonald's and Burger King and going to the movies and the malls. I didn't grow up with that kind of stuff.
So did you live in the U.S. at all when you were young, or was it just in Europe?
There would have been periods of time that we've come back to the United States. My dad would be stationed like in California, Kansas, New Mexico, and Texas. But all of those only lasted for a year's time, where Spain and Italy were like 5-year stints.
So what was it like going to school there? What were some of your experiences?
Right, so that it was a great deal in terms of the transportation. When I was in elementary school, it took me an hour to get to school, as my father was in communications. So we were more stationed more towards the mountains to where he could do his job in communications. So I was an hour away from school then. And then in high school, we lived 2 hours away. So I had to take a train for 2 hours every day to get to high school, which if we're starting off at 6 o'clock in the morning, just to get to the train station, get on the train, get on a bus to get to the base, was a total probably like a 3-hour stint going and coming back. So I never had a first period. None of us who took the train to school had a first period because we didn't get to school till 9:30.
That is incredible. And you did that every day?
Every day for 3 years.
Wow. And while you were in school, did you have any experiences that really stood out to you and I don't know, kind of shaped you as a person?
I think that as a child and growing up in high school, I was always one of those that fought for the underdog. And then even in high school, in my senior year, being elected class secretary and being a part of leadership kind of set the tone. And then volunteering. I'm a very big volunteer buff. I started volunteering with the Red Cross, thinking that I was going to venture off and be a doctor, not knowing that I was actually going to be a state representative.
And you also speak other languages.
Conversational languages of Spanish and German and Italian.
Living in these foreign countries and then coming back to the U.S., how does that impact how you see issues and people?
That took me many, many years. I think it really took me a good 20 years to just get over culture shock, to start assimilating, if you will, into the American culture. If I grew up in a European culture where they don't take things so seriously. It's not so tight and crisis driven, where they're more of enjoying life and laid back, but still caring about their people. So this brings me here to the United States with leading people now is the diversity, I think, is key, and that not everyone is the same. I am not a leader that runs in the lane of status quo. I run in the lane of differences, that everyone is different and everyone is unique and everyone is special.
And the diversity that you were exposed to as a young person, that continued into adulthood with the different careers and job experiences you have had. So can you talk a little bit about the variety of different things that you've had the opportunity to do?
That's good because, really my adulthood after graduation did not start in the way that most people would start off as a 17, 18-year-old. First of all, the egregious part of the story is while in high school, no one ever asked me which college was I thinking about going, would I like to attend college, even though I had won the sewing award. I made all my own clothes. So I could have been the big fashionista right now instead of a state representative. But I did go off to college for 2 years, but wasn't really prepared for that. So I ended up joining the U.S. Army. And so that also adds more diversification, not just being a military family, but now serving my country in the military. And my first duty station was in Germany. So I'm, again, in a different country, learning different people. But I think what's very good about the military and the uniqueness part of it is everybody is coming from all over the United States in one unit. So I may be serving with someone from Alaska or someone from Florida and getting to know what their cultures are.
And beyond the military, you've had other experiences, like you were a school board member, and tell us about some of the other things that you've had the opportunity to do in your career.
I think I was stating that I started off as a volunteer at the Red Cross. With that volunteer continued throughout my career, volunteering with the Pierce County Housing Authority Board, or volunteering with the largest indoor celebration for the Martin Luther King celebration, which eventually led me to an elected position, and that was with the Franklin Pierce School Board, serving there for 3 years until I became a state representative.
So can you talk a little bit about how these experiences impacted your decision to run for state representative?
I don't think that they were decisions that really were laid out in my mind as this was a goal. The goal for me really was to be on an island writing a book after my daughter graduated in 2019. So in my culture, talking about being an elected official is not normal dinner conversation. So it was a surprise to me when community members came to me and asked me, would I like to run? I had no idea what this position entailed or what it meant or what power is behind these types of positions. So I started off in the best place, and that's researching, looking at the resolution that actually started state representatives and finding out what is my job? What am I going to be responsible for?
So since you have been a legislator, you have worked on quite a few different issues. And I know that one of the issues that's important to you is housing and homelessness issues. Talking again about some of your experiences, you have lived experience with homelessness. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that experience impacts your engagement on that issue and your interest in that issue?
Yeah, I think that to just lead up to that, being in the military and being a military family makes us nomads. So I never really grew up in a place to call home. Home was wherever we were. So coming here to the United States, being an Army veteran, a school board director, a very vital person in my community, to end up homeless was just baffling. How does this even happen to someone? But we all say the cliche, you are one paycheck away from homelessness. But this homelessness actually began in substandard housing, and it began in lack of communication with the landlord and their tenant and being evicted over $50.
That has to have such a powerful impact on the way that you see this issue. For when you see people who are experiencing homelessness, I can't imagine that isn't really impactful. How does that influence the way that you engage on this issue as a legislator?
Well, it says that I was there and that I could be there again. So why not make the laws to protect even myself if I'm going to be out there? But the reality is this, Sonja, that homeless people are not a category for me. They are people who lost their ability to be housed because it's just not a right yet. But for me, I was there with losing my dignity, right? And what we are supposed to be. I'm an elected official. So nobody's expecting me to be without a home. Having my closet inside the trunk of my car, right? Or my storage unit is where I stored all my suits, where I could campaign and change and would go into my storage unit to change clothes. This lets me know that this is not just me who's doing this. I saw other people coming into their storage units doing the same exact thing that I was doing. So when I'm in Olympia and we're talking about how do we solve this housing crisis, a lot of times we want to apply a textbook answer and we want to go away feeling good that I did my part. But when I come to the table, I'm like, that's probably not going to work, because to actually drive on the streets as a homeless person, you can only experience it. For instance, where do homeless people get to hang out? We don't have day centers. We used to have the Nativity House. Not sure exactly what happened to that. But that was a concept that's needed. Where did I hang out at? Parking lots in my car to take a break from the day. Where do people use the bathroom? Where do people throw away their trash? We look at this homeless issue as a blight on our community, right? Where we drive by and we see encampments. But what if you were there? Just think about that. Put yourself in their shoes. There are no trash bins there. There are no porta potties, albeit I did ask for them. I asked the local government for hand washing stations when the pandemic started. I asked our local leadership about what about porta potties? What about picking up garbage? It always comes down to money. But aren't we worth it?
And clearly, the diversity of experiences you have had brings so much to this conversation at the state level. I'm wondering, from that perspective, when you are engaged in these conversations as a state leader, how do you see the state being able to help local jurisdictions like the city of Tacoma to address some of the needs of our most vulnerable populations in trying to address homelessness and housing issues?
This is what I do know. I do know that at the heart of it, everybody wants to solve this issue. No one likes seeing their brother or their sister or their neighbor sleeping in a tent on the streets. That isn't the perception that I think we as elected officials take. We are more looking at how can we help. That's what most people run on. We want to help our communities. So the collaboration between the local government and the state government and the federal government is extremely important. And the 5 years that I've been this elected official in this position, I've experienced that the state will go and ask for the money for the programs that the local government needs, and the local government will implement those programs.
When you are looking at the next session, so housing is going to be a big issue again, like it was last year. What do you expect some of the other issues to be in this upcoming 2024 session?
I'm not sure exactly, because that's the beauty of this. I have 57 other colleagues who will be bringing their ideas to the table, but I do know a piece of legislation that I will be introducing in 2024, and that is that we need a Department of Housing. Currently, all of our housing programs in the state are spread out amongst different state agencies. And so it isn't to say that those state agencies weren't doing a great job. They were. But the issue has become larger than we had anticipated. And it deserves intentional, focused look at this issue and how do we solve this. So this is a department that will not only deal with homelessness, but how do we build up the housing supply that we are lacking? And then what about emergency housing? We have nothing on the books now to say, for instance, when the flooding happened in Whatcom County, those people were displaced out of their house and we had nowhere to send them except for give them a voucher for a hotel for 2 days. So this is something that the state, we should take responsibility for in ensuring that we have the adequate housing, adequate amount of supply, and adequate programs that keep people housed. So putting an eviction process inside the Department of Housing is something also that will work. It's more or less looking at a holistic approach to the housing crisis that we're having.
It's a really interesting idea. So are you thinking you would have this department and pull in the different housing functions from different agencies into the one department?
That is correct.
That's a very interesting idea. So what are some of the other priorities that you have for this upcoming session?
I think the other one that I'm going to be working on is the African American studies, in bringing that to K through 12. I think this is an issue, as we have proclaimed that our state is an anti-racist state. This is the perfect opportunity to continue the work that we have started since I've been here. As you know, that I have passed the hair discrimination bill, the Juneteenth as a state paid holiday, and the Community Reinvestment Fund. And then these bills are things that are justifiable to Black and brown people to be recognized and for a reconciliation. And I think that to move on in this space is now to ensure that we all are walking with the same information, the truth of history. It is unfair for us to send our babies to school and not teach them the exact history that they are going to be living out when they become adults. So I just want to make sure that all of our students are armed with the truth of the information so that they can have adequate information to make meaningful decisions when they're adults.
That leads me to a question that I think is very related, and that is that you are one of a historic number of legislators of color in our Washington State legislature. Can you talk a little bit about what that means to you, and what impact do you think that has had to our legislative process in Olympia?
It is awesome that the state of Washington has decided that they know that they would like to see elected officials that look like them. And I think that's the premise of all of this. We were moving in a space of white supremacist culture and status quo when only these positions were known to white men, not even white women. So as we move forward in history and we're diversifying, It is awesome. When I first started in 2019, we had 5 Black African Americans serving in the state legislature. And now that number has grown to 11 Black African Americans serving in the Senate and the House. But even more so, it's not just about Black African Americans that makes this state so rich in the diversification of our elected officials. 40% of the House of Representatives caucus is members of color. So this is for our first Iranian serving, our first refugee from Vietnam is serving, our first Native American woman is serving. So this is the richness that we say we're on the front lines of America, and we're showing and role modeling what our state government should look like.
Do you think it changes the dialogue and the conversation in the legislature and in your caucus?
Most definitely.
How so?
It has to happen, because I can never be a white woman. I can only be a Black woman. So I cannot bring white issues to the table and be able to negotiate those through and through without having allies, accomplices, and co-conspirators. So it's the same thing that when I come to the table, I understand my family, I understand my community, and I would expect to given the same respect with, you would work with me as a co-conspirator, accomplice, or an ally in solving issues that affect different communities.
Does it help to push the issues further, faster?
I don't think it's about pushing. When we use the word pushing, to me, it seems like that they're not receptive, and so that I have to push through. But that's actually false. My caucus is actually receptive to the things that we bring to the table. They know that these are social justices that need to happen. We need to lower incarceration of Black African Americans. We need to ensure that we get home loans for buying a house. They are aware of those issues, and for us to come and be the face of that tells my community there's someone really there fighting for me, who knows me, not who assumes that they know me, but knows me through and through, because I live that life.
So a lot of the issues that you are engaged in and that you're working on are they're heavy, they're serious issues. And when you step back and look at the issues that are facing the state and the city, what are some of the things that concern you most?
I think as I look across the nation, right, because a lot of the legislation that I bring are national issues. And I think as I'm bringing African American studies, this is one that we really have to pay attention to. As we look across the nation, there are states that have outlawed teaching this types of studies, and we need to be cognizant, because this could bring about a divide, furthering the divide that we already have, right? And pinning races against races. I don't believe that that's what we're about in the state of Washington. I really do believe that in the state of Washington, we want to do the right thing, and we want to be the people who can say truly, without any doubt, that we are truly an anti-racist state. And so I think that that's part of where we have to ensure that we stay focused, because things can be a trend, as equity as could be a trend. I don't hear that word as much as I heard it 2 years ago. Now I'm hearing more of an eclectic way of saying it. For instance, if we said that there's a question that we should be asking, how many communities of color have you spoken to about this proposal you're bringing? And if we change that to which voices are missing from the table, those are 2 different questions to me. Mm-hmm. For one, we have just again silenced communities of color in the process.
In your legislation that you sponsor and that you are championing, the communities of color are frequently at the forefront of the communities that you are bringing legislation on behalf of. What are some of the bills that you have sponsored that you're most proud of?
I think all of the bills I am extremely proud of. I would say first, the hair discrimination bill it's extremely egregious that I would even have to run that bill in this day and age. But it does protect our workers, that we do not have to subject ourselves to chemicals in order to be assimilated and appearing a professional according to someone else's definition. So those types of things are important. But I think even more so, the most important piece of budgetary item that I got through was our Community Reinvestment Fund. And that was a recommendation that came from our Social Equity and Cannabis Task Force that said that we need to right the harm that was caused by the war on drugs, and we need to pay back in some sort of way to alleviate that harm. And one of those ways is money. And I love that this program here is really in 4 buckets: in economic development, civil legal aid, reentry services with wraparound services, and then prevention and intervention of youth violence, as we've seen just here in Tacoma that our youth violence has elevated.
Those are all very important issues, and you've been a champion of so many of them. I can't believe how fast our time has gone by today.
Wow, we're out of time already.
Not quite. I have one final question that I want to ask you about before we leave today. And that is I want to ask you, what is one fun fact about you that you'd like to share?
Let's see here. I think a fun fact is they used to call me, and they probably still do, the Pink Croc Lady.
Why is that?
A very interesting story. First of all, I wear pink Crocs because wearing heels, as you know, it just does the feet terrible on marble floor that we walk around on the Capitol.
Could not agree more.
Right? So I had 2 pairs of pink Crocs when I arrived at the Capitol. One of the pair of pink Crocs, my daughters and I, we gave away because we were riding around Olympia. We came through a homeless camp. We saw this woman walking with no shoes. Let us not forget that I was homeless at the time. So I went to my trunk and gave her a pair of my pink Crocs, plus a blanket. But then at the Capitol, at 5 o'clock, I've had enough with the heels. So I changed into the pink Crocs, and everybody thought that was the cutest little thing. And they were calling me, oh, look at her pink Crocs. But the crux of the story is that they got lost and they got thrown away. Being delivered from my office to the floor, they ended up in another chamber and they got thrown away. So we had some students who come and volunteer at the Capitol. They went and did an investigation and finding out where the pink Crocs had went.
That is a great story. I wish you'd worn your pink Crocs today.
I'm sorry I didn't.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's been just a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Inside Tacoma, and join us next time. I'm Sonja Hallum, your host, and look forward to seeing you.